When I first moved into this so-called exclusive HOA neighborhood, I thought I'd finally found the perfect place to settle down after years of running my farm empire. Beautiful homes, quiet streets, and what seemed like a friendly community. But little did I know, behind those manicured lawns and polite smiles hid a group of people who had no idea who they were dealing with. It all started with my tractor, yes, my John Deere. One morning, I parked it on my driveway after hauling in a few dozen crates of produce from one of my nearby properties. Within hours, I got a letter shoved in my mailbox, notice of violation. Apparently, tractors were unsightly and didn't align with the community's aesthetic. Now, I could have just laughed it off and moved on, but it wasn't just about the tractor. It was the tone, the entitlement, the assumption that I didn't belong here because I wasn't rolling up in a luxury SUV or wearing a golf polo. What they didn't realize was that I own over 4,000 acres of farmland, have contracts with national food distributors, and could buy half the homes on this block in cash if I wanted. But I didn't want revenge. At first, I went to the HOA meeting. Thinking we could talk like adults, I introduced myself, tried to explain what I do and how that tractor had more value than half their cars combined. But they weren't having it. A couple of them even smirked, talking over me like I was just some nobody who lucked into a house here. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules, it was about pride, about image, and about them underestimating me, so I decided to play along, smile, nod, let them think they'd won. But I had other plans they didn't see coming. And let's just say it didn't take long before their little power trip came to a crashing halt. What happened next? Well, you're going to want to hear this. The funny thing is, they never even asked what I did for a living. They just assumed. One of the board members, Susan Neal, never forget, her looked me up and down like I didn't belong. Like I'd tracked mud into their perfect little neighborhood. She even whispered something to the guy next to her during that meeting while I was talking. They all laughed, real quiet, thinking I couldn't hear. But I did. That's when I knew this was more than some petty rule about driveways or appearances. This was personal tea. Most folks hear farmer and picture someone dusty, broke, and out of touch. But farming today, it's big business. I run a multi-million-dollar operation with employees, logistics, tech, all of it. I've flown across the country negotiating contracts, stood on stage speaking at ag conferences, and I've never once been treated with this much disrespect, not even in a boardroom full of suits. After the meeting, they started watching me. I'd catch people driving by, slow, snapping photos of my property. One guy even stopped and asked if I was planning to open a farm stand in the neighborhood. I told him no, just bringing in a load of equipment from my eastern field. His eyes widened like I'd spoken a different language. They had no clue that I actually own half the land just outside this HOA boundary on that one of their prized walking trails cuts across one of my leased plots. What they also didn't know was that I was quietly documenting everything. Every message, every note left on my door. Every side comment at those monthly meetings. I wasn't just going to let this slide, but I needed the right moment to make my move. And believe me, when it came, it hit harder than they ever expected. But before we get to that, things got even messier. After that first wave of tension, things started to shift in a strange way. I'd go out in the morning to check my truck or load up supplies, and I'd notice little things: my tires slightly deflated, a fresh scratch across the tailgate, a few nails suspiciously close to the edge of my driveway. At first, I figured, maybe it was bad luck or just careless neighbors, but after the third time, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like a message. Meanwhile, the HOA kept piling on the pressure. I started getting new citations, noise complaints when my crew delivered tools before sunrise, unauthorized landscaping for the native plants I added along the fence, even a notice for having excessive dust from a utility trailer. Most of it was nonsense, and they knew it. but they were testing me, seeing how far they could push before I'd snap or give in. I didn't at the same time. I started getting curious glances from a few other neighbors' people who weren't on the board, just regular folks living their lives. One of them, Linda, came by one morning while I was working in the garage. She said, not everyone here agrees with what the HOA is doing. Turns out she and a few others had their own run-ins with Susan and her little clique. One got fined for a flagpole, another for having a camper parked in their driveway for less than a day. It was all part of a pattern control, intimidation, and targeting anyone who didn't fit their mold. I started keeping notes, not just for myself, but because I knew there was something bigger brewing here. This wasn't just about a tractor anymore. It was about power, perception, and a group of people who didn't expect someone like me quiet, country, successful on my own terms to challenge their little system. But I wasn't going anywhere. And with every new petty move they made, I got closer to exposing what was really going on behind those fancy front doors as the weeks went by. The tension in the neighborhood was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every time I pulled my tractor out or even just parked it, I felt eyes on me judging, waiting, hoping I'd slip up. The HOA didn't just want me to comply, they wanted me gone. I could tell because their notices became more aggressive, their tone more hostile. It wasn't subtle anymore. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I found a flyer taped to my front door. It was anonymous, but clear, a warning to keep the tractor off the street and respect the neighborhood. I knew exactly who was behind it. But instead of backing down, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about a tractor or some neighborhood rules. This was about respect, something they had completely ignored when they dismissed me at that first meeting. I started planning, not some petty revenge, but a way to show them what real power looked like. I called in favors from people in the farming community, lawyers who specialize in property rights, even old friends who knew the ins and outs of HOA law. I wasn't going to fight dirty, I was going to fight smart. But I kept all this quiet. Let them think I was just a harmless farmer with a noisy tractor. Then came the night, everything changed. I heard a loud crash outside. Rushing out, I saw my tractor's front tire slashed, the engine hood dented, and a weird symbol spray-painted on the side. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a message. Whoever did this wanted to intimidate me, to scare me off my own property. But instead, it lit a fire under me. The next HOA meeting was just days away, and I knew this would be the moment they either realized they'd gone too far or tried to push me out once and for all. The whole neighborhood seemed to be holding its breath, and I wasn't the only one watching. Linda and a few other neighbors had started quietly siding with me. Tired of the heavy-handed tactics and secret meetings behind closed doors, I walked into that meeting ready for a showdown. But I had no idea just how explosive things were about to get. The tractor ban was just the beginning. What came next would change everything, just when I thought things couldn't get any more intense. The night before the big HOA meeting, I got a call that changed everything. It was from an unexpected voice, Susan, the same woman who had sneered at me from the boardroom. The one who seemed determined to make my life miserable. Her tone was different, almost nervous. She told me there was something I needed to know. Something the rest of the HOA members were hiding. Something that could blow this whole neighborhood apart. Turns out, the tractor ban was just a smokescreen. Behind the polished emails and community standards was a secret plan to sell a chunk of the neighborhood's common land to a developer. A developer who wanted to build a luxury condo complex right next to our homes. The kind of development that would not only ruin the quiet vibe, but could also tank property values, something none of the regular residents were told about. The tractor? It was in the way, a convenient excuse to push me out before I started asking too many questions. I was stunned. This wasn't just about me and my tractor anymore. This was about greed, lies, and betrayal on a whole new level. Susan said she didn't agree with the plan and had been trying to warn a few people quietly. But the board was too powerful, and they'd already started making deals behind closed doors. The fact that she reached out told me there was a divide, even within the HOA, and maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. With this new secret hanging over everything, the stakes skyrocketed. It wasn't just about fighting for my tractor or my place in the neighborhood anymore. It was about protecting the entire community from a hidden agenda, exposing the truth before it was too late. And as I prepared to face the board the next day, I realized this battle was about to get a lot more dangerous and a lot more personal. The next day, the tension in the room was electric as I stepped into the HOA meeting with Linda and a handful of other neighbors who'd started to believe me. The usual smug faces were there, but this time I had the upper hand. I pulled out the documents Susan had sent me, the emails, the contracts, the meeting minutes showing the secret deal with the developer. The room went silent as I laid it all out, piece by piece, exposing the deception the board had been hiding from the community. Susan stood up, visibly shaken but determined. She confirmed everything, admitting she had tried to stop it but was overruled. The board members scrambled to defend themselves, but the proof was undeniable. The tractor ban, the petty fines, even the vandalism, it was all part of a plan to force out anyone who might stand in the way of their big money deal. What surprised everyone most was how calm I stayed. I told them I wasn't just a farmer. I was someone who cared about community, about honesty, and about protecting what's rightfully ours. The neighbors started to speak up, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment, and suddenly the power shifted. The board had underestimated the quiet strength of a multi-millionaire farmer who wasn't afraid to fight back. Just when it seemed the battle was over, a final twist hit the room. As the meeting adjourned, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a video someone had been secretly recording the entire board discussing the deal, revealing even more corruption and plans to silence dissent. The video wasn't just proof, it was a game changer. I realized then that this fight was far from over, but now the truth was out in the open. The tractor ban was lifted. The developer's plans were halted, and the neighborhood began to heal. But I knew I had to stay vigilant, because in this game of power and pride, there's always another move waiting in the shadows. And I'm ready. After that explosive meeting, the neighborhood changed in ways I never expected. The board members involved in the shady developer deal were voted out, and new leadership took over, people who actually cared about the community and transparency. The tractor ban officially lifted, with an apology that felt more like a formality than a true gesture. But for me, it was never really about the tractor. It was about standing my ground, showing that success and hard work don't make you less of a neighbor. Linda and a few others became close allies, and together we started organizing community events, planting gardens, and rebuilding trust in a neighborhood that had been fractured by secrecy and suspicion. The fear that big money would swallow up the area vanished, replaced by a renewed sense of pride in where we lived. Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal wasn't just a battle against an HOA, it was a lesson in resilience and respect. It showed me that sometimes the quietest people have the loudest voices when it counts, and that standing up for what's right can turn the tide even against powerful odds. I still drive my tractor around proudly, not because I need to prove anything, but because it's part of who I am. And if anyone ever tries to tell me it doesn't belong, well, I know better now. So if you're watching this and feeling underestimated or pushed around, remember this story. Sometimes the biggest battles come from the smallest sparks, and the difference between losing and winning is having the courage to fight back. Thanks for sticking with me through this. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share because every community deserves to hear the truth. Until next time, keep standing tall, no matter what anyone says.